Thank you for joining us here on this Sunday evening. I'm meteorologist Dorien here with Live 5 News, and we do want to give you the latest information on still tropical storm Debby. Let's take a look here at the 5 o'clock advisory, and you still see those sustained winds are holding steady at 65 miles per hour. So that's no different from what we saw at 11 o'clock, and still the same at the 2 o'clock hour as well. But notice that orientation is still moving directly to the north. So it is starting to move slower, at least moving to the east eventually. As we go into the next several hours, we'll start to see a little more of that easterly component as we go into the overnight hours. But notice here on the latest forecast cone, this is also no different. We are still tracking out possibly a Category 1 hurricane moving into the Big Bend of Florida later on this evening and eventually making an official landfall by the middle of the day tomorrow. But do note, as we go into the extended period, Tuesday, it is going to be moving across Georgia, but even outside of that, we'll start to see some of our rainfall as early as Monday afternoon and evening. But otherwise, we are still tracking this system, a very slow moving system, and more likely a tropical depression, as we do have those very small subtleties in the track, moving it more so onto land, but we could still see the potential of a brief reemergence there across the Atlantic Ocean. But either way, do be prepared for that very heavy rainfall as the most significant risk. But we do also want to give you an update on those alerts that we have been getting from the National Hurricane Center in real time. So our tropical storm watches are still largely unaffected. We did have tropical storm warnings extended towards the Georgia border, but places north of that, so really the majority of the low country, are still underneath tropical storm watches. That's just an indication that we still have between 36 and 48 hours until we start to see those tropical storm-like conditions. But the thing that you may have noticed, and maybe your phone went off like ours did here at Live 5 News, we are now under storm surge warnings for some of our coastal counties. You'll get that alert if you are in Charleston County, even Tidal Berkeley County, so that's there, and Daniel Island, even extending down the coast towards coastal Colleton County and eventually Beaufort County getting in on that alert. But the reason why is because of that coastal inundation. And remember, storm surge is what you do see above normally dry ground. Even if you don't typically see flooding, we certainly could see upwards to 2 to possibly 3 or 4 feet of that rising water there in some of our coastal locations, and more prevalent, of course, the closer you are to water. But let's also talk about the hydrologic outlook, because we still have flood watches that go into effect tomorrow morning, and really everybody except for Williamsburg and Georgetown County, they're underneath another National Weather Service office. So we don't have that flood watch in effect right now, but that's something that could be extended to include everybody within the coming hours. So we'll watch that very closely. Either way, we are tracking some very significant flooding that is certainly likely now as we go into the next several days. But let's take a look here at our future tracker. We still have some rainfall right now, and this model in particular actually has not been handling it so good, at least what we do have this evening. So just be mindful, we still could see a couple more hours of light to moderate rainfall. Not going to be anything of concern in terms of flooding, but notice as you're waking up early tomorrow morning, we'll start to see some cancellations, of course. But do note, we do have a couple rounds of heavy rainfall possible as we get into the Monday morning hours. That's technically with that boundary that's still across our area. That's where we have the rainfall right now, and technically we'll get more of that energy from Debby moving in later in the afternoon and evening. So we'll have some more dry time. I do think we're at about an 80 to 90% chance of rain tomorrow, because we could see at least that afternoon dry time. But notice by the Monday evening time frame, that's when we are looking at the bulk of the rainfall, and this will be very persistent even as we go into our Monday night and Tuesday morning. And notice those winds here in the hatched areas. We do have that maybe approaching tropical storm force along our coastline, and especially across the Tri-County, where we could get that mixing down to the ground. But notice all of that heavy rainfall will be continuing into the day on Tuesday, and really round of this depending on where the center of circulation lies. But either way, do be on the lookout for several hours of moderate to heavy rainfall that we could be seeing at least going into the rest of the week. Now, Tuesday night may be a break, but each model is a little bit different. So just be on the lookout for hours of rain, and then maybe a couple of hours where we don't see anything at all. But either way, I do think Wednesday does start at least our highest risk of those gusty winds, and tropical storm force winds could be likely, especially closer to the coastline before the system moves farther inland. But notice these rainfall totals actually remain unchanged. Here's a look at one of those models, the European model, still above a foot of rain in some locations. We are still given a broad brush swath of areas up to 10 inches, if not higher, especially closer to the coastline. We are giving you that range about 20 inches as a maximum, so just be on the lookout since we do have that a very historic perseverance here across the region. But notice here, as we get into the GFS model, also in strong agreement. So these models are beginning to tighten up on exactly how much rainfall we can see, and upwards to a foot, if not higher, is certainly a strong possibility here over the next several days. Of course, that total is a little bit lower as you go farther west of I-95. Orangeburg and Clarendon counties could be seeing between 5 and 10 inches of rain, and the majority of that I do think happens later in the period as the system begins to trend farther inland. But east of I-95, we do want to give you the first look to extreme flooding potential, as we could see at minimum 10 to 15 inches of rain. And of course, we are going with that maximum value near 20 inches. But the winds are also unchanged. 40 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts will begin likely on Tuesday, and we'll start to increase that potential as we go into our Wednesday and Thursday. And notice the flooding potential. We do have those storm surge warnings now officially in effect for our coastline, but we also still carry the risk of that moderate coastal flooding that can come in terms of those high tide cycles, which we'll have more information on as we go into the next several days as well. We do have a high tide coming up tomorrow morning. That's not going to be the highest one. We'll start to track those even higher, of course, as we go into the next several days. But be sure to download the Live 5 First Alert Weather app, and we're going to have more updates more often, really starting at 6 o'clock this evening on Live 5 News. And also a good tool to use, just going to our website, live5news.com/hurricane, for all of the latest information. But for now, I'm meteorologist Dorien Miner. Hope you have a great and safe evening, and join us here on Live 5 News at 6 o'clock.